Wow, that was quick. Look at that. Today is what is it? Friday, April 24th, 2026 here in House Transportation. And we have our ledge council with us again. We continue to work on the miscellaneous motor vehicle S326. And earlier, the side by side, earlier we had sort of asked Damien to do some extra work on a sort of all the specialty plates and pieces and who gets an antique license plate and who gets special pieces to sort of educate the committee at our vice chair's request. And I was hoping we could go over that this morning to start, and then we'll see which other ones we get, little items we can get to. This was sent from Damien and is out on the committee page.
All right, and I am waiting to join the Zoom meeting here.
And this is regarding section 28 of the DMV bill.
Just a second, and I'll answer. Just,
26, 326.
yeah, it's S326.
That's better.
This is for
the
specialty.
limited use specialty vehicles, which are, oh, whoops, I'm looking at the wrong summary here.
It's not license plates, or it is license?
Not that section, not regarded to cover them up, regarded to giving the specialty vehicle the reduced rate and also what other vehicles have applied. I was going to pull that back, grab it. Vice Chair, yeah, the $600,000 vehicle that gets a $26 registration fee. But there are other pieces that are out there.
Right?
Limited use of the actual road, right? It's not a tax.
Use, yeah.
Use. Find that piece. Comparison of specialty vehicles. Damien sent it out to the committee on April 16th, if you're looking at it in your email, or if you're looking at it on the committee page. Comparison of requirements.
Could you please let me into the meeting?
Streetwide and limited use specialty vehicles.
That was on the 16th.
The 16th email, yep.
And
And
then
under Damien as a witness. Comparison of requirements for antique, exhibition, street rod, and limited use specialty vehicles. What we're talking about. Your request.
Yeah, no, I think it's,
Limitations on use, inspection.
really good to
requirements.
see whether or not the section is needed.
It's a one pager, right?
Yep, it's a one pager. So it's an 11 by 17, so it's probably looking small on your screens if you're looking. But I will share it here in just a second. All right. So I've broken out antique and exhibition vehicles, street rods, and limited use specialty vehicles. So first I'll start with just what these vehicles are. An antique and exhibition vehicle is a vehicle that's maintained for use in exhibitions, club activities, parades, and other functions of public interest that is not used for general daily transportation of passengers or property on any highway. Generally, these vehicles are at least 25 years old. If you went out to the K-Truck, mini truck demo day, one of the trucks there, the fire truck, had an exhibition or actually an antique plate on it. I think that was a 27 or 28-year-old truck. Street rods are a vehicle with a body and frame that were manufactured before 1949 and that has been modified for safe road use, or a replica that resembles the original pre-1949 vehicle and has also been modified for safe road use. And this can include substantial and material alteration or replacement of the engine, drivetrain, suspension, or brakes, or alteration of the body, which may be chopped, channeled, sectioned, filled, or otherwise changed dimensionally from the original manufactured body. Can all of you picture a street rod?
We might need a. We don't know, sorry.
So, but if you want,
Yeah.
so here, they're great. But here's a just, pull this up. Share a different image here. So here's a great example of a street rod. So pre-1949 vehicle, modified. In this case, a lot of times they have an exposed engine. I like, when I was a kid, I called them Dick Tracy cars. So they're, but it's that sort of, that early American automobile. It's been modified for current road use. So little red sports car, exactly.
Skit in our future.
Next year, you can do the street rods, the antiques, and the limited use specialty vehicles. I mean, so in contrast, a limited use specialty vehicle is a motor vehicle that is built by either a manufacturer that manufactures not more than 325 vehicles per year for sale in the US, or by an individual and not for resale. So this includes basically two things. So Senator, I'm promoting here. You hear Representative McCoy. Representative McCoy's favorite term, the resto mods, which are new vehicles that look like older vehicles, or they could also just be a micro manufacturer of sort of boutique custom vehicles. And then it also includes kit cars, which can be all the way across the board. But frequently they're a body and a frame and some components, and then you buy an off-the-shelf sort of drivetrain to go in it. So when I was in college and reading a lot of magazines about this, a popular option was to get a body and then put a Ford Mustang drivetrain in it. So that's sort of the, that's an example of those kind of cars. And then it has to be maintained solely for occasional transportation, which could include, just like the antiques and exhibitions, club activities, parades, and other functions of public interest. And it's not used for daily transportation of passengers or property on any highway. So that the B and C, you'll notice, matches up to the antique and exhibition vehicle, and that was intentional in the Senate's construction of this language. Street rod is set out in the inspection manual. It's defined. It's not actually defined in statute.
Question for Representative Pell.
Not for daily transportation of passengers. Do any of these limit, whether you can have a passenger with you? No.
No, you can have a passenger in any of these vehicles as long as they have a seatbelt, and they have safe seating. But what it's limiting basically with the limited use specialty vehicles and antique vehicles is that they are not for daily transportation. So they're, again, limited use basically vehicles. You'll see down on the limitations on use, there are none that are listed for the street rods that I'm aware of, but for both the antique and exhibition and the limited use specialty vehicles, it's not to exceed 1 day per week. So theoretically, law enforcement, if they saw you taking your vehicle out multiple days per week or on a daily basis, could pull you over for violating the registration.
Representative Burke.
Would some of these not have seatbelt?
It's true. Some of the antiques may not have seatbelts. Yeah. Yes.
Representative White?
Damien, is this comparison, is this working with what is an existing statute? Or is this limited use specialty vehicle reflective of what we've got in the DMV bill?
So the limited use specialty vehicle is language that's being added in the Senate's proposed DMV bill. It is based on the antique exhibition provisions in the statute. So their intent was to try to mirror that as much as they could, with some exceptions you'll see around the inspection requirements. They are subject to annual safety inspection, whereas model year 1940 and before vehicles, like some of the ones that Representative Burke just mentioned a moment ago, are exempt from the annual inspection, provided that they're equipped with standard components in good mechanical condition. And that would be a judgment call for law enforcement there if they see something going down the road that they feel is not in safe condition. Yeah, the big difference between the limited use specialty vehicles and the antique exhibition is that the limited use specialty vehicles, including the kit car type, are going to have modern safety and vehicle components in the car. The antiques may have old style brakes, narrow tires, etc. So they may not have, what we would consider modern safety features. Keeping with the inspection, after model year 1940, antiques and exhibition vehicles are not exempt from inspection, but they're inspected under the special motor vehicle provisions in the manual. The home built vehicles that are registered as exhibition vehicles are exempt from the onboard systems emissions requirements, but they may still need a visual emissions, making sure they have an exhaust system that's functional under the vehicle, doesn't have holes in it, that sort of thing.
Representative White?
Yeah, on that, so shouldn't we say something more detailed than no emissions inspection if we are wanting to make them subject to a visual? Or, because I would question why we would allow these newly built specialty expensive vehicles to not have an emissions inspection.
That's a policy decision for you. The proposal downstairs was that they would have the annual safety inspection without an emissions inspection, understanding that in order to get one of these vehicles built and made street legal, you have to build it with components that comply with California or EPA emissions requirements.
And that is part of the definition of.
That's under the Federal Clean Air Act.
Okay,
So you can't.
so you can't build a car today unless you are using these particular pieces that are.
Right. So, for example, I mentioned before, people taking a Ford Mustang engine and putting that in. Part of the way that works is you have to install the engine and the emissions parts to specifications of the manufacturer, which have been tested to meet the emissions requirements under either the EPA or the California standard. In Vermont, we follow the California standard, which is a little more stringent than the EPA. The thing here is this is just at the point where it gets a VIN and it gets registered on the road. After that, it's not under the Senate construct. It's not subject to even a visual emissions inspection. You could require visual emissions. You may want to hear from the manufacturers on the OBD2 emissions. My understanding is that if I remember what was in the report correctly, that was done on this type of these limited use vehicles. Some of the vehicles may not be able to meet the OBD2, particularly home-built vehicles. But they all do need to be built with a compliant engine and exhaust system from the get-go.
And that is clear enough that there doesn't need to be any additional language.
It's under federal law.
Okay.
So yeah, we don't have any authority in Vermont to modify those requirements. But the question is, do you want to check each year to make sure, or every 2 years, if we go to 2-year inspections, to make sure that they still have working emissions equipment based on a visual inspection, which is what cars that are older than 16 years are subject to at this point.
And just the one other point, which I think we had brought up before, was we're saying maximum of 12 vehicles registered per year, and I think we had said maximum of 12.
This just reflects the language as it came over from the Senate. So yes, I have a note that the committee wants to correct that to 12 additional vehicles registered per year.
We need to see language to do that. And I also want to comment that the testimony from, I think also from the advocate on these emissions, these engines don't have any place to plug in to test. So they can't pass because they can't plug it, right?
But if there's a visual inspection, then you're not having to plug anything in. It's, and I'm not exactly sure what's involved with that, but at least it's like some type of nod to emissions requirements.
Representative Keith?
I was going to make the same point. We had testimony that said that those vehicles were not able to be tested because of the way they were built. But because they were built under the new standard, they are assumed to comply. And there's so few of them, I guess, no harm, no foul type of thing.
Yes, Representative Thompson.
Well, just to be clear, though, all new vehicles are built under those emissions.
Right, if they're
standards. So
sold in the
it's-
United States,
By that
yeah.
same logic, we could just not have emissions. I mean, I guess the volume of cars is much lower, but the logic doesn't really follow to me. Except that there's not the plug-in, but for a visual inspection, that seems doable, and it's odd to me to make an exception for cars that are like more than like $500,000. So, but
Again, that becomes a policy call for the committee, and the Senate chose to go with no inspection, but you can propose otherwise to them.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted this chart out to sort of lay that picture out. But I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
We have for the other ones, why not? I don't think it's a big deal either way.
And then on the fees, the registration fee for the antiques and exhibitions and the proposed registration fee for the limited use specialty vehicles is $26 for each. Again, the Senate chose to just match up the antique exhibition vehicles. The registration fee for a street rod is $89. So it has a regular pleasure car registration fee. One of the special notes for the street rods. It's $89 is the registration fee. I believe there's an emissions fee on top of that. It's
There is
a couple of dollars. Yeah,
okay.
clean air
Yeah.
impact fee that goes on top of that. But yeah, the Title 23 registration charge is $89. All of these will have the additional charge that comes under, I think it's under Title 10 that charge is imposed.
Representative,
Perfect. I'm Russo, Deputy Commissioner for DMV. It's already included.
That was
The
it?
emissions.
Okay. Great.
You know, I should say.
Thank you. I stand corrected. So so the street rods have certification of verification for street rod, which is basically when you're initially registering the vehicle, it has to go to one of I think it's 4 or 5 designated inspection stations in the state where they have to certify that it meets the standards for street rod under the special vehicle standards. And then with the antique and exhibition vehicles, There is one registration plate issued, unlike the two that you get for a normal pleasure car. And then Vermont registration plates issued prior to 1968 may be displayed on the vehicle instead of the issued registration plate, provided that the issued plate is carried somewhere within the vehicle and can be produced upon request by a law enforcement officer. And then to get the antique car number plate, it has to be at least 25 years old or older to qualify.
The visual inspection for the hot rods, is that just once to get it registered or?
No, they go through an annual safety.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they go through an annual inspection under this
But there's
motor
only
vehicle provisions.
certain places you can have the visual.
It's a good question. Can they, the annual inspection can be anywhere, right? Yeah, it's
There were
the,
certifications. Handful.
So in the manual to do inspections, it talks about this particular class.
yeah, there's a special vehicles chapter within the inspection manual. And that breaks down the things that are checked and the standards that they have to meet. Other questions? Would you like me to move on to the noise emission standards?
Just a second on that piece. This idea of this 1 day per week, is that an exact copy of the antique exhibition?
That was taken directly from Antique
Okay.
Exhibition.
There was a question on my notes of whether or not we did or did not want to change any of the language related to the 1 day, but what I'm saying here is that we copied it. It was copied from what was already there. So is there any sense that I had 3 things noted for these sections that were questions to be, and now there's a 4th, I guess. Whether we did or didn't want to do anything about the 1 day language, and it sounds to me like it's copied of the way things are already handled and expected. So I don't know if that's a big question anymore or not, but whether there's a need to change anything.
Yeah, and we didn't have anything in the testimony that said, we need more than 1 day. It seemed to be satisfied with just getting that category.
So I'm just looking at things that I want to check off that was mentioned, whether we did or didn't want to do something about that. To me, I didn't realize it was the same, so.
Yeah, I just don't recall testimony regarding how often they would drive these specialty vehicles. But if they did say 1 day seems appropriate, then that seems, I mean, if they were using it every day, I would think that we'd obviously want to change that. We'd also maybe want to look at the registration fee.
When the Senate committee chose the registration fee, they just chose to continue mirroring. So it was.
I thought the question was if they were going to a car show, and it was, if they needed to stay overnight, it would be 2 days.
And the antiques and the exhibitions are running under the same language and have been forever. I don't know if we want to wade into changing all that or not.
I mean, not be able to go.
Representative Brooke.
Well, I'm thinking about like at the Guilford Fair, and they have an antique car exhibition, so somebody's gonna be driving a car to the place on 1 day and maybe driving it back the next day or 2 days after that. Should be moving to Guilford.
Did you have?
I mean, Amy might be able to consider this better, but I believe the difference between an exhibition and an antique. And it also states that you can drive it once per week for pleasure reasons, going to the store, going to the ice cream stand, or to parades and exhibition shows.
So if you were driving to an exhibition, you
I
have
believe
that
it's-
leeway to be able to drive more than
Yeah,
once per week.
The way it's worded is that it may be used on public highways in exhibitions, club activities, parades, and other functions of public interest, and occasional transportation not to exceed
It's just-
1 day per week. So it's an and.
Separating out those two functions.
Yeah, and that applies to antiques exhibitions, and it would now apply to this limited use specialty vehicle. So if you went to the ice cream stand on the 3rd of July, and then we're in the 4th of July parade, I think you would fall within the permitted uses of the statute. So.
It's not broke. We don't need to fix this.
Yeah. And just, again, the creamy stand is open for the season, so my priorities here.
Where are you thinking?
And the other question is, do we need to change the language on this better than the 12 per year?
So it's, the way it is right now, it would limit, I think it would arguably limit DMV to having no more than 12 limited use specialty vehicles registered at any time. So you may want to say 12 additional if that's the intent, that you could gradually grow the number of these, although again, it's a very small number versus the total number of vehicles registered in the state.
Is this an issue, a concern? Do people want to do something about this or not, or we're gonna?
I would think the insertion of a couple words would be sufficient.
Have these sort of antique car events, do people come from lots of different states? Is 12 enough for?
So this is for Vermont registration. This is like to get Vermont plates. This doesn't prevent someone who has valid registration plates from another state that permit their car to be used on streets to come into Vermont. Yeah, so that's important to note. This is just Vermont owners registering their cars here in Vermont as within this category. It's not going to affect someone from New Hampshire who drives across to show their car at the fair here or at a car show or something like that.
I guess I'm just concerned about, like, are we meeting demand? Do we understand the demand is, I guess the 12 sufficient is the question.
Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that.
Well, we're hearing one, but could be other companies, could be other, it's just a question that it said, 12 per year, that's it. So whoever comes up with the 13th is out of luck. That's all.
It's worth noting too that
Question for us, I guess, Representative Pouch.
Yeah, I'm all right if you said no more than 12 a year. Otherwise, I think the DMV would have to keep track of exactly how many they have.
and
Additional ones.
It's also,
Yeah, I'm saying,
it's also based on a waiver, so they don't meet emission standards. So this is a waiver to allow them to get a registration in event. So I'm not sure that we could exceed 12, but it can be tracked in our system easily.
You're not saying we shouldn't exceed 12?
I'm not sure the specifics of the waiver, but it's based on a waiver that we're getting
you don't want to,
federally for emissions.
So it's a federal waiver. Oh, okay.
So that we
Got
can
it. Okay.
allow these on the roads
yeah,
without meeting emission standards, and that's why it's limited to one. Or the idea was that it would be limited to once per week. Okay.
yeah. And this is based on,
12 per year.
yeah, the 12 came out of essentially, we took the California proportion, which is also based on that same sort of waiver. It's limiting the population of these vehicles or the number of these vehicles within the overall population of vehicles. And saying that they have a de minimis impact on emissions within the state.
Oh,
The way it's worded now, we are limiting a total of 12 vehicles forever in the state, as opposed to adding a maximum of 12 per year. So I guess I need, what does the federal, if we have to follow federal requirements, can we do that?
Yeah. I'm looking to see if I can pull up the California statute here.
We just leave it at 12, because I don't think they're gonna be burning through these, so we'll come back in
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
Come back in 10 years.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to move on the sections, but I want to make sure we're already set on the questions.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 questions I had. I want to make sure we either are making a change or we're thumbs up and we're going to
Yeah.
accept it all as is.
I'm all right with it the way it
I'm
is.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I can get an answer on the California if you want it, or I can leave it as is, whichever.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the only thing is visual inspection.
I guess we're looking over there.
Well, I mean, Representative White, Representative Townsend, you know, I think I concur with that.
Yeah. Get the visual.
Well, we have one.
Why do we not have a visual inspection
Yeah, yeah,
like
why
the other
not?
category?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If we're gonna start marrying it to the other ones, yeah.
We want to be consistent
Yeah,
across
because
the,
Yeah.
yeah.
does that issue creates a problem at all?
If you want visual inspection of the emissions, I'll make a change in section 27.
Is there a concern with that anywhere else? Or not? Is that the direction the committee wants to go? So I guess you'll have to bring that back to us so we can thumbs up this section. We're leaving the 12 and we're leaving the fee and we're adding the visual inspection to be consistent with the other specialty vehicles, antiques and exhibition vehicles. Try to be consistent across the new chart.
Okay. You want to move on to the federal noise emission
An
standards?
estimate of time on that.
Depends on the questions.
Let's say that we're none. And you just presented the info and then we'll come back to the questions. At another point,
I can do it in 5 if there are no questions.
well, we won't take any questions till you go through it and then we'll figure out if we have to revisit it, but we're gonna get done in the next. Get
So-
over 1:15.
For those of you who want to look at this more closely later, I've provided a copy of this to the committee.
I'm
Not,
talking about section 29 related to
29.
motorcycles.
yep.
The research that was requested from the committee.
Yeah, so the federal noise emissions requirements for motorcycles, the requirements change when you go before 1986. Essentially, those motorcycles can be louder. But for motorcycles used for street use and dirt bikes manufactured in 1986 or later, street bikes may not exceed 80 decibels at the time of initial sale to the public, and dirt bikes may not exceed 82 decibels. The exhaust systems and components have to be designed and manufactured to ensure that they meet those federal noise limits and be properly installed at the time of sale. Or they need, and then the noise limits are based on proper install and maintenance. The motorcycles are required to have a label that has this wording. So this blank year, blank model specific code of motorcycle, and the model codes will have a 3-letter code for the manufacturer, and then additional information designating the model. And then a serial number meets EPA noise emissions requirements of 80 decibels if it's a street bike or 82 if it's a dirt bike at blank RPM by the federal test procedure. Moderate modifications which cause the motorcycle to exceed federal noise standards are prohibited by federal law. See owner's manual. And then the motorcycle exhaust has to have matching language that said this manufacturer's name exhaust system meets EPA noise requirements for the following motorcycles. So it's one or more motorcycle model codes listed there. Installation on motorcycle models not specified may violate federal law. And so essentially, and then the same language here is for the aftermarket parts here. So if you're buying an aftermarket part, that language is there. That said, there are plenty of aftermarket parts that you can buy that do not meet these requirements, and it's just at the time of the sale. This doesn't necessarily prevent the person selling the motorcycle from swapping out the exhaust as part of the sale. So you can get straight pipes and other modifications commonly are available. But this is basically when the manufacturer ships it and then it's sold by the dealer. It has to have those parts initially, and then it's up to the owner what they want to do after that under existing laws.
Representative Case?
How do they measure it? Now you're saying 80 decibels from how far away?
There's a federal test procedure, and I forget the exact distance, but it is a certain distance away from the motorcycle measured in a certain manner. It's decibels on the A scale, which is a scale where essentially our perception, it's a logarithmic scale. So the noise goes up sort of on this hockey stick kind of curve instead of going up on a line. So 80 to 82 decibels is actually a fairly significant jump, even though it's only 2 decibels. But I can get you the exact test procedure. It's in the federal regs.
Yeah, I'd like that.
And I'll pull that regulation for you and send it to the committee to share. But it is a specified test procedure where I forget if it's 50 feet or something like that, that they measure the sound. And it's at a specific rate for the engine too. So most of the time when you're driving around, if you're not revving the engine, it may not meet that, but then when you rev the engine hard, it's going to meet that decibel requirement. And then, like I said, in Vermont, as far as I know, there's nothing that prevents you from installing an aftermarket exhaust, provided it meets the other requirements for the motorcycle safety inspections and emission standards. But the other states do have requirements like a motorcycle, and the testing requirements are all over the place, but there's a breakdown. Some of them, it's based on the speed of the motorcycle. If it's measured from a certain distance from the midline of the highway, they have a sound sensor, then you're in violation if you exceed a certain limit. Oregon has a test, which has a much higher limit, but the testing device is placed a few feet from the exhaust. So the sound's going to be a lot louder. So
does every law enforcement officer have the tools on the road to measure?
So this here would be requiring labeling. So if the exhaust was not labeled to match the motorcycle, that motorcycle would fail inspection. And so it's at the time of inspection. The Senate proposal is that at the time of inspection, they would have to check to make sure that the label on the motorcycle and the label on the exhaust true up so that the model number on the motorcycle matches the certified model numbers on the exhaust.
We heard the gentleman from Harley Davidson sit there and say that you can't, some pipes don't have stickers.
That's correct. So at the time of manufacture, if it's going to be sold in the US, federal law requires them to have that matching, but there are numerous options on the aftermarket parts that you can get for motorcycles that do not have a certification.
This, we wanted to know what the federal regulations were at the time of manufacture, at the time of sale, not at what we're doing the inspection. But it was asked, what were the federal regulations at the time of manufacture and sale?
Yeah,
And they have gone through this test and this information to be approved to be able to be. So
Right, this is the federal noise emissions requirement.
what happens after that is where we're headed next, not today.
And
Not today, but where we're headed next, but you wanted to know what that federal regulation was. For example,
Two things. One is, so based on the federal law, if you buy a brand new motorcycle, has the, EPA for noise limits, safety issue, they consider that. So, and then you swap it out. Does the federal law just sort of say, well, we don't care? Or is that federal law saying that's what's required?
So, I was looking only at the federal labeling requirements. I can dig into this more deeply for you. My understanding is that the feds don't enforce this beyond that initial labeling requirement, and that it varies by state. Many states don't worry about the labeling, they worry about a roadside test. And then other states have labeling requirements.
Then the second thing is, we did have testimony from the Harley dealer who said, hey, during inspections, we're looking for not necessarily what's there, but looking for modifications that, you know, they implied modifications that would not meet the standards, the safety inspection standards. So I'd be looking to ask the DMV to give us a clear understanding of what the safety inspections are that they're looking for.
And that's coming next.
Right.
Unfortunately, this piece, we are going back into this in a much bigger detail. This was for our ledge council to present what I thought was requested about what the federal standard was. And so with that, we're adjourned for today. Have a wonderful weekend. Great job yesterday as a team, and nice to hear all the great compliments of the group, and particularly nice parts about how much the committee was obviously enjoying doing it, regardless of whether there was an audience or not. No, it didn't matter if there was an audience. Apparently, we were cracking ourselves up. So we are adjourned.
I do